The wealthy boss handed an expensive dress to the janitor, Amina, inviting her to an important negotiation where she would make a surprising discovery. The morning sun had barely risen when Thabo Maseko stepped through the revolving doors of the towering skyscraper that housed his business empire. His footsteps echoed through the marble lobby, blending with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. With his impeccable suit and determined expression, Thabo exuded an aura of power, prompting employees to instinctively straighten up as he passed by. Entering the elevator, he released a subtle sigh. The dark circles under his piercing brown eyes told of sleepless nights and the mounting pressure of a multi-million-dollar deal slipping from his grasp. Foreign investors were hesitant, and Thabo knew he needed something extraordinary to secure the deal. As the elevator doors opened on the top floor, he was greeted by his assistant, Zola, an efficient middle-aged woman who had worked by his side for years. "Good morning, Mr. Maseko," she said, handing him a cup of black coffee. "The reports you requested are on your desk, and the video conference with Johannesburg is scheduled for 10 a.m. Thabo nodded, absorbing the information as he walked toward his office. But something unusual caught his eye in the corridor. A middle-aged woman, dressed in a janitor's uniform, diligently cleaning the windows. Her presence wasn't what surprised him. It was the dedication and genuine smile she wore, qualities that felt out of place in the cold corporate environment. "Zola," Thabo called out softly. "Who is that woman?" Zola followed his gaze and replied, "Oh, that's Amina Kohn, sir. She's been with us for about 6 months and is one of our most dedicated janitors." Thabo watched Amina for a few moments, intrigued by the simplicity and authenticity in her movements, which contrasted sharply with the artificial, calculated world of business he was accustomed to. When he entered his office, he found himself unable to concentrate on the reports in front of him. His thoughts returning repeatedly to Amina. Acting on an impulse he didn't fully understand, he called Zola back. "Zola, I need you to do something unusual for me," he said, his voice firm but with a hint of uncertainty. "Find the most elegant dress you can and give it to Ms. Kohn. Invite her to attend tomorrow's meeting with the investors." Zola stared at him, dumbfounded. "Sir, are you sure about this?" Thabo nodded, his decision solidifying. "Absolutely. There's something about her and authenticity that might be exactly what we need to close this deal." As Zola left to carry out his request, Thabo wondered if he was losing his mind. Inviting a janitor to a crucial negotiation was risky, possibly even detrimental, but something in him insisted it was the right choice. Later that evening, Amina was finishing her shift when Zola approached her with a luxurious package, her expression both formal and surprised. "Ms. Kohn," Zola began, "Mr. Maseko would like to see you in his office now." Amina looked down at her calloused hands and stained uniform. "Me? But why?" Zola handed her the package. "He asked you to wear this." With trembling hands, Amina opened the package, revealing a stunning navy blue dress. Her eyes widened in astonishment. "There must be some mistake," she murmured. "There's no mistake, Ms. Kohn," Zola assured her. "Please change and go up to Mr. Maseko's office." Minutes later, a transformed, extremely nervous Amina stood outside Thabo's office, knocking softly. When she entered, she felt like she was stepping into another world. The luxury of the office left her breathless. Thabo rose to greet her, his eyes assessing her transformation. The dress fit her perfectly, highlighting an elegance she hadn't known she possessed. "Ms. Kohn," Thabo began, his voice gentler than usual. "Thank you for coming. Please have a seat." Amina settled into the leather chair, feeling both out of place and confused. "Mr. Maseko, I don't understand. Why am I here?" Thabo studied her for a moment. "Ms. Kohn, I've been watching you. Your dedication, your authenticity, they're rare qualities, and they're exactly what we need to close a crucial deal tomorrow." Amina blinked in disbelief. "But I'm just a janitor. What could I possibly offer in a business negotiation?" A rare smile crossed Thabo's face. "Sometimes, Ms. Kohn, it is precisely what we consider our greatest weakness that can become our greatest strength. Your unique perspective, your honesty, they might be the differentiators we're looking for." As Thabo explained the details of the deal and her role, Amina felt a mixture of fear and excitement swell within her. It was an opportunity she'd never imagined, a chance to prove there was more to her than met the eye. I don't know if I can do it," Amina admitted, her voice trembling. Thabo leaned forward, his eyes meeting hers. "Amina, I believe you can. More than that, I believe you should. Life often presents us with unexpected opportunities. It's up to us to have the courage to seize them." Amina took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision. It was frightening, yes, but also exhilarating, a chance to show the world and herself what she was capable of. "Okay," she finally said, her voice gaining strength. "I accept." Thabo smiled, a genuine warmth lighting up his normally reserved eyes. "Excellent. Prepare yourself, Amina. Tomorrow we'll surprise everyone." As Amina left the office, she felt like she was floating. The elegant dress, the unexpected invitation, and the trust Thabo had placed in her, it all felt surreal, yet she knew it was real. Her life was about to change forever. Meanwhile, Thabo watched the city from his office window, reflecting on the decision he'd made. It was certainly a risk, but something deep inside assured him it was the right one. Tomorrow would be a day filled with possibilities, and perhaps the beginning of an extraordinary partnership. The sun had barely risen when Amina awoke, her heart pounding with anticipation. She looked at the stunning navy blue dress hanging in her modest closet, a surreal sight in her small one-bedroom apartment. With shaking hands, she prepared a simple breakfast, every movement seeming charged with meaning, as if the entire universe held its breath for the day's events to unfold. "You can do this, Amina," she whispered, gazing at her reflection in the kitchen window. The face staring back at her was one of determination mingled with apprehension, her eyes gleaming with both fear and excitement. At exactly 8 a.m., the doorbell rang. Amina opened it to find Zola, accompanied by a team of stylists and makeup artists. "Good morning, Ms. Cohn." Zola greeted her with a professional smile. "We're here to help you get ready for the meeting." Amina swallowed, feeling overwhelmed. I didn't expect all this." Zola's smile softened. "Mr. Maseko wants to ensure you feel comfortable and confident. Shall we get started?" The next few hours passed in a whirlwind of activity. Amina was bathed in luxurious creams, her hair was styled, and her nails were manicured to perfection. Each step was a new experience, sometimes uncomfortable, yet surprisingly pleasant. As the makeup artist worked on her face, Amina couldn't help but marvel at how her life had transformed so drastically in less than 24 hours. Yesterday, she had been just a janitor, unseen by most of the office. Today, she was preparing for a meeting that could change the fate of a multi-million-dollar company. "Is everything all right, Ms. Cohn?" the makeup artist asked, noticing Amina's distant expression. Amina blinked, coming back to the present. "Yes, it's just. All of this feels unreal." The makeup artist smiled understandingly. "Sometimes the best things in life are the ones we don't plan. You look beautiful, by the way." Amina looked into the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. Her face was radiant, her eyes highlighted in a way she'd never imagined possible. It was as if a hidden version of herself had emerged. Finally, it was time to put on the dress. Zola helped Amina slide it over her body, carefully adjusting it. "Perfect," Zola murmured, stepping back to admire the result. Amina turned to the full-length mirror and caught her breath. The dress fit perfectly, accentuating curves she hadn't known she had. For the first time in her life, Amina felt truly beautiful. "You're ready," Zola said, checking her watch. "The car is waiting downstairs." The drive to the office was a blur for Amina. She watched the city pass by from the window of the luxury car, feeling like an imposter in a modern fairy tale. When they arrived at the company building, Amina felt all eyes on her the moment she entered the lobby. Whispers and surprised glances followed her as she walked towards the elevators, Zola by her side like a silent guardian. On the top floor, the elevator doors opened to reveal Thabo Maseko, impeccably dressed in a dark gray suit. His eyes widened slightly at the sight of Amina, an approving smile crossing his face. "Ms. Cohn," he said, his voice softer than usual, "you look stunning." Amina felt her cheeks warm. "Thank you, Mr. Maseko. I hardly recognize myself." Thabo offered her his arm. "Shall we? The investors will be here soon." As they walked down the corridor together, Amina couldn't help but notice the shocked and curious looks from other employees. She recognized some of them people who had barely noticed her before, but now they stared with a mix of surprise and, in some cases, envy. Thabo led her into a luxurious conference room overlooking the city. Before the investors arrived, he turned to her. "I want you to know that I trust you completely, Amina. Your authenticity and unique perspective are exactly what we need today." Amina nodded, feeling a surge of gratitude and determination. "I'll do my best, Mr. Maseko." The next few minutes were tense. Amina watched as well-dressed executives entered, each casting curious glances in her direction. She sensed both confusion and silent disapproval from some. Finally, the foreign investors arrived. Amina watched, fascinated, as Thabo greeted them with charm and authority. To her surprise, he then called her forward. "Gentlemen," Thabo announced confidently, "I'd like to introduce Amina Cohn. She brings a unique perspective that I believe is crucial to our discussion today." Amina stepped forward, heart pounding, as she felt the investors' eyes appraising her. She took a deep breath, saying, "It's a pleasure to meet you all. I'm looking forward to contributing to our discussion today." To her surprise, one investor smiled warmly. "It's refreshing to see such an innovative approach, Mr. Maseko," he said. "We're interested to hear what Ms. Cohn has to say." As everyone settled in, Amina felt both nervousness and determination. She was stepping into a new world of challenges and opportunities she'd never imagined. Thabo gave her an encouraging look as he began his presentation, preparing her for her moment to speak. Amina took a deep breath, ready to be authentic and bring her perspective to the table. She couldn't help but think about how drastically her life had changed in such a short time from janitor to participant in a crucial negotiation. She was about to embark on a journey that would test her courage, intelligence, and adaptability. The day was just beginning, and Amina Cohn was ready to face any challenge. The room buzzed with anticipation when Thabo stood to begin his presentation. Sitting beside him, Amina could almost feel her heart beating in sync with his, like a drum resounding in her ears. She watched, fascinated, as Thabo navigated through graphs and financial projections, his confident voice commanding the room's attention. The foreign investors' seasoned businessmen watched with steady expressions, though Amina noticed their eyes occasionally turning toward her, curious about her role in the meeting. When Thabo finished his presentation, he turned to Amina with an encouraging smile. "And now," he said, voice soft but firm, "I'd like you to hear Ms. Cohn's unique perspective on our project." For a moment, panic threatened to overwhelm her. But then she remembered who she was. Not just the woman in an elegant dress, but a janitor who observed and understood the nuances of day-to-day business. She stood, hands trembling slightly, but her voice was strong. "Gentlemen," she began, "I may not have years of experience in corporate business, but I have something I believe is just as valuable a view from the shop floor, so to speak." Amina spoke about what she observed daily: the dedication of employees, the small inefficiencies that went unnoticed, and the corridor conversations that revealed the true pulse of the company. Her honesty and unique perspective captured the investors' attention. "What Ms. Cohn describes," Thabo interjected, seizing the moment, "is the kind of insight you don't get from financial reports. It's a deep understanding of the heart of our company." Impressed, one of the investors leaned forward. "Ms. Cohn, your perspective is refreshing. How do you see the company's growth potential from your unique position?" Amina hesitated, then found her voice. She shared conversations she'd overheard, the ideas from operational-level employees that were rarely acknowledged, and the loyalty she saw in those who often felt overlooked. As she spoke, Amina noticed a subtle shift in the room. The investors were leaning forward, genuinely interested, while Thabo watched her with admiration. Not everyone was pleased. Amina noticed whispers and skeptical glances among some senior executives, particularly Richard Ndaba, the CFO, who seemed especially annoyed. When the meeting broke for lunch, Amina found herself surrounded by curious investors eager to hear more from her. Thabo stood nearby, pride evident in his smile. Yet as they made their way to the executive lunchroom, Amina overheard a conversation that made her stomach drop. "This is ridiculous," Richard's voice hissed to another executive. "Has Maseko lost his mind? Putting a janitor in this position? He's risking everything?" The reality hit Amina like a punch. She was an outsider in this world, and not everyone welcomed her presence. Sensing her hesitation, Thabo approached her. "Is everything all right, Amina?" She forced a smile. "Yes, just a bit overwhelmed." Lunch was surreal. She found herself seated among industry titans, trying to navigate conversations about mergers and acquisitions while struggling to remember which fork to use. Meanwhile, the disapproving glances from Richard and others made the tension palpable. And she wondered if accepting Thabo's invitation had been a mistake. When the meeting resumed, Amina felt the weight of expectations on her shoulders. The investors seemed to expect groundbreaking insights, while the skeptical executives waited for any slip-up. In that moment, Amina decided she couldn't pretend to be something she wasn't. Taking a deep breath, she stood. "Gentlemen," she began, voice trembling before gaining strength, "I want to be completely honest. Until yesterday, I was just a janitor in this company. I have no business background and don't understand many of the financial terms discussed today." A stunned silence fell over the room. Thabo looked at her in shock, but Amina continued. "What I do have is a deep understanding of the people who make this company run. I know their hopes, fears, and frustrations, and I believe that understanding them is just as important as understanding numbers on a spreadsheet." To her surprise, Amina found herself outlining concrete ideas, ways to boost morale, small changes to increase efficiency, and channels of communication between management and frontline employees. When she finished, silence lingered before one investor, Mr. Tanaka, began to applaud, soon joined by others. Their faces reflected respect. Thabo, recovering from his initial surprise, seized the moment. "Gentlemen, this is exactly the kind of innovative perspective that will take our company to the next level." The rest of the meeting passed in a blur for Amina. When it finally ended, she felt exhausted but strangely elated. She had faced her fears and spoken her truth. As the investors left, Mr. Tanaka stopped to shake her hand. "Ms. Kohn, your honesty is refreshing. We look forward to seeing how your unique perspective shapes the future of this company." Amina barely had time to process the compliment before Thabo pulled her aside, his face a mix of emotions. "Amina, that was extraordinary. Risky, but extraordinary." Before she could reply, Richard approached, his face a mask of controlled fury. "Maseko, we need to talk. Now." As Thabo was drawn into a heated discussion, Amina remained behind, feeling the weight of the day settle on her. She had overcome her first major challenge, but something told her more lay ahead. The corporate world she glimpsed was complex and dangerous, yet, for the first time, Amina felt she had something valuable to offer. She was determined not to waste this opportunity, no matter what obstacles awaited. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, when Thabo finally left the office. The day had been an emotional roller coaster, from Amina's triumph at the meeting to the heated discussions that followed. Driving home, Thabo felt drained. Despite the meeting's success, he felt empty. The city lights reflected his whirlwind of thoughts. Arriving at his luxurious suburban mansion, he was greeted by silence, the kind that had become his constant companion in recent months. Walking down the hallway, he glanced at a photograph on the wall, a sunny beach snapshot of him and his late wife, Zuri. The pain of the loss hit him anew. "Dad?" A soft voice broke the silence. Thabo turned to see his 12-year-old daughter, Malika, standing in her bedroom doorway, her eyes so much like Zuri's, filled with concern. "Hi, sweetheart." Thabo forced a smile, hiding his exhaustion. "How was your day?" Malika shrugged, a gesture he recognized as an attempt to hide her own feelings. "Normal, I guess. Mrs. Thompson asked for you again." "You missed another parent-teacher conference." Guilt hit Thabo like a punch. He had forgotten again. "Malika, I'm sorry. I promise I'll come to the next one." Malika nodded, but her eyes showed disappointment. "It's okay, Dad. I understand. You're busy." As she retreated to her room, Thabo felt the weight of his failure as a father. Since Zuri's death, he had buried himself in work, using it as a shield against the pain, but in doing so, he had neglected the most important person in his life. Pouring himself a glass of whiskey, he sat at his desk, eyes falling on a pile of papers, divorce papers that had never been signed, medical bills from Zuri's battle with cancer, and bereavement counseling booklets he had never read, sinking into his chair. He felt the weight of months of repressed emotions. Tears he had held back for so long finally began to fall. Just then, his phone rang. It was Amina. Mr. Maseko? Her voice was hesitant. I'm sorry to call so late. I just wanted to thank you for today, and to make sure you're okay. You seemed a bit shaken after the meeting. The genuine concern in her voice caught Thabo by surprise. For a moment, he considered maintaining his professional facade, but something about her sincerity broke down his guard. Actually, Amina, he said, voice hoarse with emotion, things aren't right, not for a long time. To his surprise, he found himself venting to her about Zuri's illness, her death, and how adrift he felt afterward. He talked about Malika and his sense of failure as a father. Amina listened silently, offering kind words of understanding. Her empathy, so different from the coldness of the corporate world, was like a balm for his wounded soul. Mr. Maseko, she said softly, you don't have to carry all this weight alone. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is ask for help. Her words resonated deeply. In his effort to appear strong, Thabo realized he had isolated himself from those who could support him. Thank you, Amina, he said, his voice breaking. I think I needed to hear that. After they hung up, Thabo sat in silence, reflecting on their conversation. Finally, making a decision, he rose and went to Malika's room. He knocked softly. Malika, may I come in? Entering, he found her on her bed, hugging a teddy bear Zuri had given her. Her eyes were red from crying. He sat beside her, feeling his heart break. Malika, I'm sorry. I know I haven't been the father you deserve. Malika looked up, eyes filled with sadness and hope. I miss Mommy. Me too, sweetheart, he said, pulling her into a hug. Me too. Father and daughter cried together, sharing their grief for the first time since Zuri's death, a moment of healing, the start of a long recovery process. That night, as he put her to bed, Thabo made a silent promise to himself and Zuri. He would be a better father, find a balance between work and family, and most importantly, open his heart again. Returning to his office, he looked at the papers with fresh eyes, picking up the bereavement counseling leaflets, finally deciding to face his grief head-on. As he prepared for bed, he reflected on the day, Amina's courage in the meeting, her kindness on the phone. It had all sparked something in him. A change was beginning, not just professionally but personally. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and possibilities, and for the first time in a long time, Thabo looked forward to facing them. The office buzzed with activity that Wednesday, the familiar hum of conversations and ringing phones creating a symphony of business and progress. Yet for Amina Cohn, every sound felt amplified, echoing in her ears as a reminder of the unfamiliar world she'd entered. Amina was sitting at her new desk, a modest but elegant space in the corner of the executive floor. Her fingers glided nervously over the keyboard as she tried to absorb the information on the screen. Graphs, spreadsheets, and financial terms swirled before her eyes, a whirlwind of data she struggled to comprehend. Thabo entered the office, his firm, determined steps contrasting with the exhaustion visible in his eyes. He paused at her desk, offering an encouraging smile. How are you getting on, Amina? He asked gently. Amina looked up, a mixture of gratitude and apprehension on her face. I'm trying, Mr. Maseko. There's so much to learn. Thabo nodded, his voice warm with understanding. You're doing well, Amina, more than well. In fact, that's why I have a new challenge for you. Her heart raced. A new challenge? She echoed, unsure whether to feel excited or terrified. Yes, Thabo confirmed, his gaze steady. The investors were impressed by your unique perspective, and they want to hear more from you. I've decided that you'll lead the next presentation. Amina felt the blood drain from her face. Me? But Mr. Maseko, I barely understand half of what's in these reports. How can I possibly lead a presentation? Thabo leaned in, his voice low and encouraging. Amina, you have something none of these executives have, a genuine insight into the heart of this company. That's what the investors need to hear. Don't worry about the numbers, leave that to me and the finance team. Your job is to tell the human story behind those numbers. Amina swallowed, feeling the weight of the responsibility settle on her shoulders. She wanted to protest, to tell him she wasn't ready, but the unwavering confidence in his eyes held her back. "Friday," she asked, voice barely above a whisper. Thabo nodded. "You have 2 days to prepare. I'll assign a team to help you with anything you need." As Thabo walked away, Amina felt a wave of panic begin to rise. 2 days to prepare for the most important presentation of her life, it seemed impossible. The next 48 hours were a blur of frantic activity. Amina threw herself into the reports, working tirelessly to understand every nuance of the business. She interviewed employees at all levels, collecting stories and insights to bring the cold numbers on the spreadsheets to life. As she worked, she noticed glances and whispers around her. Some held admiration and curiosity, while others contained envy and resentment. Richard Ndaba, in particular, seemed to watch her with a mixture of disdain and suspicion. The night before the presentation, Amina was still in her office, surrounded by piles of papers and empty coffee cups. Her hair was disheveled, her eyes red with fatigue. Then, a soft knock on the door interrupted her concentration. To her surprise, it was Malika, Thabo's daughter. "Hi," she said shyly. "Dad mentioned you were still working. I thought you might want some company." Amina smiled, feeling an unexpected wave of gratitude. "Thank you, Malika. I'd love the company." As Malika settled into a chair, Amina noticed the resemblance between father and daughter, the same determined eyes, the same strong chin. But there was a softness in Malika, a vulnerability that Amina suspected Thabo also hid beneath layers of responsibility. "Dad talks about you a lot," Malika said after a quiet moment. "He says you're changing things around here." Amina felt a blush rise in her cheeks. "Your father is very kind. I'm just trying to do my best." Malika tilted her head, curiosity in her eyes. "What's it like, going from janitor to this?" she asked, gesturing to the office. Amina thought for a moment. "It's scary," she admitted. "Sometimes I feel like I'm pretending, that someone will realize I don't belong here. But then I remember why I'm doing this. It's not just for me, it's for everyone who works here, whose voices aren't always heard." Malika nodded with understanding far beyond her years. "I think I understand. It's like when Dad has to make hard decisions, he says it's for everyone's good, even when it's tough." Her words struck a chord in Amina, making her see Thabo in a new light, not just as a CEO, but as a man bearing the weight of countless responsibilities, trying to do what was right. With a renewed sense of purpose, Amina went back to work, Malika by her side. Together, they organized notes, practiced parts of the presentation, and even laughed a bit, the tension of the last few days melting away. When the sun rose on Friday, Amina was exhausted but ready. She looked in the mirror, adjusting the new suit that Thabo had insisted on buying. She was no longer the shy janitor from a few weeks ago, but she wasn't the polished executive some expected her to be either. She was something unique, and she was beginning to realize that this was exactly what made her valuable. As Amina entered the conference room, she felt all eyes on her, the investors, the executives, and Thabo all waiting to see what she would do. For a brief moment, fear threatened to paralyze her. Then she remembered Malika's words, Thabo's trust, and the stories she had gathered from employees. She wasn't here just for herself, she was here for all of them. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward, ready to tell her story, the story of the company, the story of the people behind the numbers. And as she began to speak, her voice growing stronger with each word, she knew that no matter the outcome, she had already overcome her biggest challenge, believing in herself. The room fell silent, every gaze fixed on her as Amina Cohn showed the world what she was truly capable of. The morning sun had barely begun to filter through the office windows when she arrived, her footsteps echoing in the quiet of the executive floor. She carried not only her briefcase but also the weight of her presentation's unexpected success. The investors had been impressed, Thabo was elated, and Amina herself felt as if she were walking a tightrope, balancing precariously between two worlds. As she settled at her desk, she noticed furtive glances from other executives, some filled with admiration, others with barely concealed envy. Richard Ndaba, in particular, watched her with a mixture of suspicion and resentment that left Amina uncomfortable. "Good morning." Amina Thabo's voice caught her by surprise. He was standing next to his desk, a genuine but tired smile on his face. "We have an emergency meeting in 5 minutes. We need you there." Amina nodded, a wave of anxiety hitting her. She still wasn't accustomed to being included in high-level meetings. Following Thabo into the conference room, she couldn't help but notice the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands clenched. The meeting was tense from the start. Last quarter's figures were bad, and the executives were panicking. Amina watched, feeling out of place as voices rose and accusations flew across the room. "We need drastic cuts," Richard argued, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Starting with the maintenance department. It's an unnecessary expense we can outsource." Richard's words hit Amina like a punch in the gut. She thought of her former colleagues, people who worked hard to keep the company running. Before she could stop herself, she found herself speaking up. "With all due respect, Mr. Ndaba," she began, her voice shaking slightly, "I think that would be the wrong decision." The room fell silent, every eye turning to her. She felt a blush rise in her cheeks, but continued. "These people aren't just numbers on a spreadsheet, they're part of this company. They know every corner of this building, every recurring problem, every creative solution. Outsourcing would mean losing not just employees, but years of knowledge and loyalty." Richard's cold stare bored into her. "And what do you suggest, Ms. Cohen? That we keep unnecessary spending while the company sinks?" Amina took a deep breath, the weight of her experiences as a janitor and an executive converging. "I suggest we look at where we're really wasting money," she replied, her voice steady. "There are inefficiencies in our processes that cost much more than maintenance. If we optimize, we can save money without sacrificing the people who make this company work." Thabo, who had been watching the exchange in silence, finally spoke. "Amina's right. We need a more holistic approach. Amina, I want you to lead a task force to identify these inefficiencies and propose solutions." The meeting ended shortly afterward, leaving Amina stunned by her new responsibility. As the other executives left, she noticed Richard's furious look. She knew she had made a powerful enemy. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Amina plunged into her task, working long hours, interviewing employees at all levels, examining every facet of the company's operations. She was determined to prove her approach could work, but as she delved deeper, she felt the weight of expectations. She was walking a fine line between two worlds, no longer just a janitor, but also not fully accepted as an executive. Her nights were long and filled with doubts and insecurities. It was during one of these late evenings, when the office was nearly empty, that Amina overheard a heated discussion from Thabo's office. Though she didn't mean to pry, the voices were too loud to ignore. "You're throwing everything away." Thabo Richard's voice was charged with anger. "First, you bring that janitor into board meetings, and now you're letting her lead crucial projects? Have you lost your mind?" "Watch your words," Richard Thabo replied, his voice low but dangerous. Amina brought a perspective we desperately needed. She sees things we, in our ivory tower, have long since ceased to see. "She's going to destroy us," Richard shouted, "and you're too blind to see it." Amina stepped back, feeling sick. She knew her presence caused tension but hadn't realized the extent of the conflict she had created. That night, she couldn't sleep, wondering if she'd made a mistake by accepting Thabo's offer. Perhaps she was out of her depth, causing more harm than good. The next morning, with heavy eyes and a heavier heart, Amina went straight to Thabo's office. She needed to talk to him, express her doubts, perhaps even offer her resignation. But when she entered, she found Thabo gazing out of the window, a distant look in his eyes. Next to him was a photograph of his late wife, Zuri, and Malika. "Mr. Masco," Amina called softly. Thabo turned, and she saw the weariness in his eyes, the vulnerability he usually kept hidden. "Amina," he said, his voice hoarse. I'm sorry you heard that argument last night." Amina's resolve wavered. She had come prepared to resign, to run from the challenges, but seeing him so human and vulnerable, she realized she couldn't abandon him. "Mr. Maseko." "Thabo," she said, sitting across from him, "I think we need to talk about the company, about our expectations, about everything." And so that morning, Thabo and Amina had an honest conversation. They shared their fears, their hopes, and the challenges they faced. Thabo spoke of his struggle to balance work and fatherhood, and Amina talked about the pressure to prove herself. By the end, they both felt lighter, more connected, as if they'd rediscovered not just each other but also themselves and what truly mattered. Amina Thabo finally said, a genuine smile lighting up his tired face, "Thank you for your honesty, for your courage, for everything. I don't know what the future holds for this company, but with you here, I know we have a real chance to make a difference." Amina smiled back, feeling a fresh wave of determination. The challenges remained and tension still existed, but she knew now she wasn't alone. Together, they would face whatever lay ahead. When Amina left Thabo's office that morning, she carried not just her responsibilities but a new understanding and renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead was still difficult, but she was ready to face it, not as a janitor disguised as an executive, but as Amina Cohn, a woman who had something unique and valuable to offer. The autumn sun cast a golden glow over the city, painting the skyscrapers in shades of amber and crimson. On the 50th floor of Maseko Enterprises, Amina stood at her window, watching the world below. Her fingers gently touched the cold glass as if reaching out to the life she'd left behind. 6 months had passed since that first meeting, 6 months of challenges, growth, and change beyond what she could have imagined. She was no longer the shy janitor or insecure executive. She was something new, something unique, a bridge between two worlds that had once seemed irreconcilable. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called, turning to see Thabo, a genuine but tired smile on his face. "Ready for the big meeting?" he asked, stepping closer. Amina nodded, feeling a mix of nerves and determination. "As ready as I can be. I still can't believe we've come this far." Thabo placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You made it happen, Amina. Your ideas, your perspective, you've transformed this company." His words warmed her heart, but also brought a pang of guilt. There was something she hadn't told him, something she had discovered in her investigations that could change everything. "Thabo," she began, hesitant. "There's something I need to tell you before the meeting," but before she could continue, the door opened abruptly, and Richard entered, his eyes glinting with triumph and malice. Well, he said, voice heavy with sarcasm, "if it isn't our two heroes, ready to save the day." Thabo's posture tensed immediately. "What do you want, Richard?" Richard smirked, a cold smile. "Nothing much. Just thought I'd let you know that the investors are here a bit early. They're waiting in the conference room," he added, his gaze settling on Amina, particularly eager to see our rising star. With those words, he left, leaving a tense silence in his wake. Amina felt her heart racing. She knew this moment would come, but she hadn't expected it so soon. "Thabo," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly, "there's something you need to know before we go in there." But Thabo was already moving toward the door. "Whatever it is, Amina, it can wait. We can't keep the investors waiting." With a resigned sigh, Amina followed him, each step toward the conference room feeling like it weighed a ton. She knew that what was about to happen would change everything, and she feared the consequences. As they entered the room, Amina was struck by the tense atmosphere. The investors sat around the large mahogany table, their faces a mix of curiosity and impatience. But one face in particular caught her attention, an older man with gray hair and eyes that seemed to pierce her soul. Thabo began the presentation, his confident voice filling the room. He discussed the changes implemented, the efficiency gains, and the new directions the company was taking. And then came the moment Amina had both feared and anticipated. "And now," Thabo said, a proud smile on his face, "I'd like to introduce the person who made it all possible, Amina Cohn." She stood, her hand trembling slightly as she adjusted her papers, looking at the faces around her. Thabo, full of confidence, Richard, with a glint of defiance, and the older man watching her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. "Before I begin," Amina said, her voice firmer than she felt, "there is something I need to reveal, something I discovered during my investigations that directly affects the future of this company and my own past." A murmur of surprise rippled through the room, Thabo's expression shifting to confusion. Amina took a deep breath. "During my analysis of the company's finances, I discovered a series of suspicious transactions from 25 years ago, transactions that led to the bankruptcy of a small family business and the abandonment of a child." Silence filled the room, each heartbeat thunderous. "That child was me," Gasps echoed, and Thabo's eyes widened in shock, but the older man's reaction held everyone's attention. He rose slowly, his eyes locked on her, unshed tears glistening. "Amina," he whispered, voice thick with emotion, I'm your father." Chaos erupted. Voices rose in disbelief. Richard shouted accusations and Thabo looked stunned. But for Amina, the world shrank to just her and the man now known to be her father. Years of questions, of loneliness and abandonment, culminated here. "Why?" she asked simply, her voice laden with emotion. Her father took a hesitant step closer. I made terrible mistakes, Amina, mistakes that cost me everything I loved. When I lost the company, I lost myself. I thought you'd be better off without me." His words hung heavy, weighted with decades of regret and unresolved pain. Thabo finally broke the silence. "Amina, did you know when you agreed to work here?" Amina shook her head. "No, I found out during my investigations. I wanted to tell you, but it never seemed like the right time." Thabo nodded, understanding dawning in his eyes. "You're not here for revenge, are you? You really want to help the company?" "Yes," she said, her voice firm. "Because after all, this company has become my family. All of you have become my family." Her words melted the room's tension one by one. The investors nodded, murmurs of approval replacing accusations. Her father took another step. "Amina, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but if you'd give me a chance, I'd like to mend what I broke so long ago." Amina looked at him, then at Thabo and the others. She saw fear, hope, regret, and above all, the possibility of a new beginning. "I think," she said, a small smile forming, "we all deserve a second chance." And with those words, a new era began for Maseko Enterprises, one of transparency, reconciliation, and bridges being built between worlds once thought irreconcilable. As the meeting dissolved into plans and animated conversation, Amina found herself beside Thabo, watching the scene unfold. "You know," Thabo said softly, "when you told me that sometimes our greatest weakness can become our greatest strength, I think you proved that today." Amina smiled, a surge of gratitude and hope warming her. "We proved it," she corrected gently. "All of us." And so, on the 50th floor of a skyscraper, a new story began, a tale of redemption, growth, and family found in unexpected places. A tale of unexpected elegance, born from the ashes of the past and blossoming in